Hey friends, this is Casey, and this is Let's Tell Their Story. In the United States alone, over the past 40 years, over 200,000 cases have gone unsolved. Whether that be missing persons, unsolved murders, or unsolved suspicious deaths. I'm here to tell you the stories about the cases that were never solved. I hope I can bring light to these cold cases that just sit and collect dust. I go through every case with as much research as I possibly can and give you the knowledge that I was able to find. Today's story, however, is a little different from what I've done in the past. I do want to give out a trigger warning for child abuse and murder, so let's tell this story. Multiple love stories with more twists and turns than a one-car country road. I'm going to go through the characters that are part of this story, kind of give you a background on the couples that are involved. We'll start with Tim and Christina. When Tim Dean and Christina Hill's marriage ended due to Tim's infidelity, they shared custody of their 3-year-old daughter, Madison, who went by Maddie. Maddie plays a very important role in this. According to Tom Flood, a lieutenant out of Dumas Police Department, Tim had almost failed out of the police academy, having an issue with authority, and used the fact that his father was a respected sergeant with Amarillo PD. Tim worked his way through the ranks at the Dumas Police Department. Tim had become the chief of police in Sunray, Texas, and as respected as his father was to the city, it was a no-brainer to elect him to chief of police of Sunray. Tim was the chief to 2 deputies under him. However, Tim was no Andy of Mayberry, though. As chief, Tim's ego could inflate since he was the top authoritarian and could shoot the orders instead of having to take them. Within 10 days of Tim becoming chief of Sunray, he purchased 10 firearms from a local pawn shop, for what reason are still unclear. Josh and Charlene. Josh Edward Niles was born in 1990. His family never imagined that at the young age of 17, he would fall in love with Charlene Charlie Elbert. Over the next year or so, Charlene would become a significant fixture in the Niles home. As when Josh was 18 and Charlene was 16, they welcomed a little girl to their relationship that they would name Gabby. As high school sweethearts, the world was unstoppable, and they welcomed a boy, Bentley, 2 years after Gabby. As the young couple did their best to make the struggles of a young family work, the two realized that they both had grown up way too fast and really hadn't grown up at all, and had ended their relationship in 2013. The split being cordial, that custody with the children was never an issue. Then there's Charlene and Jace Childers. After Charlene and Josh had separated, Charlene's parents moved to Texas, and Charlene was quick to follow. This is where Charlene met and married Jace Childers, and they welcomed a little girl, Skylar, to their marriage. The marriage hadn't lasted very long, and the two had went their separate ways. Josh and Amber. Shortly after Charlene moved to Texas, Josh met Amber Washburn, a girl who always had a smile on her face, was gentle, but when needed could be fiery, and was like the soulmate Josh didn't know he was missing. Amber took to Gabby and Bentley right away and loved them as they were her own, and then Josh and Amber added to the family with their own son, Josh Jr., and Josh Jr., he would come with his own challenges, as Josh Jr. was diagnosed with autism. Josh and Amber were great parents to all 3 children when they had all 3, since Charlene and Josh shared the custody of Gabby and Bentley between Texas and New York. Even with the challenges of Josh Jr.'s autism, Josh and Amber made the best of it and shared the love. They had just started making plans to get married. Tim Dean and Charlene Childers. This would be the last of the couples that I'll be mentioning. In 2016, Charlene began hanging out a lot at the Sunray Police Department, where she worked with the Animal Control Department. This would be where she met the chief, Tim Dean. It wouldn't take long, and the two would be having a hot, steamy affair. Tim would close the blinds to his office, and the two would have makeout sessions in the parking lot of the police department that would sicken the other deputies that knew that Tim was a married man, though he did not try entertaining the idea of keeping his affair with Charlene a secret, which ultimately led to the divorce with Christina. In March of 2018, Tim and Charlene married. Tim buys a beautiful brick ranch house in Sunray, where their beautiful blended family would live happily ever after. Charlene would post to Facebook and Instagram pictures of how happy the blended family was, hashtagging soulmate, and family is everything. And if this is the case, I want to have a story to tell you now, would I? Now that we have a background on all the characters that play vital roles in this story, it's going to get ugly real quick. Charlene's photos would turn to a video that she secretly took of Tim when they had Maddie. Of Maddie eating or not eating, and it pissed Tim off. He was screaming profanities at Maddie to the point that his anger took over and he slapped Maddie across the face. Instead of Charlene intervening to help Maddie, she tells Gabby to come near her and continues to tape the incident. This video she does end up posting on her Facebook to a few remote friends and family, and not because of Maddie's safety, more to let others know that her rosy little family smelled more like asparagus. With the video leaked, Tim was given a letter of 5 days after the incident to resign as the chief of police in Sunray. The resignation was titled Termination of Employment for Good Cause. Tim is eventually arrested and charged with a felony third-degree injury to a child. With Tim's felony charge, the couple lose any rights that they may have had to the 4 children. Skylar went to live with Jace, who lived in Texas and still allowed Charlene to see her, whereas a judge ruled that Gabby and Bentley would be safer in New York with their father, Josh Niles. Charlene drove the kids to Sodus, New York, to Josh. Tim had taken a flight to New York only to drive back the 1,500-mile trip with Charlene to Texas. Tim should have been looking for a job instead of taking a flight only to take a road trip. At this point, Charlene is beyond pissed and begins plotting out the demise of Josh. With Tim accompanying her on her trip back to Texas, she informs Tim that Josh needs to be taken care of, because that would be the only way she would get her kids back. Honestly, the bitch did it to herself. Back in their beautiful brick ranch home, while hanging out in their 2-car garage in early October of 2018, with another Sunray police officer, Ron Bowler, Charlene tells them the plan to take care of Josh. Charlene tells Tim that he needs to shoot Josh, and to not be caught, that Bowler would need to rent a car for Tim to drive to Sodus, and if the neighbors asked about the rental, to just lie and say that the starter in his own car was acting up. In the beginning, this is when the beginning of 9 lives are about to change forever. A gun is stolen out of the PD locker by Tim. Bowler rents the car, and he and Charlene pick the car up from the Amarillo airport. On October 19th, 2018, Tim packs up the car with a blue plastic bin that he fills with a black ski mask, guns, ammo, and some soft armor. A man that only a few months prior was the chief of police and had an issue with authority was now taking orders to murder someone from the same woman that had ultimately costed him everything. Where mortgage payments were piling up, bills weren't being paid, and their credit cards were maxed out. Charlene definitely had a hold over Tim. Tim begins his journey to New York that Friday to ultimately kill Josh. Around 4 a.m., Tim's dumbass crashes the rental car trying to turn around he crashes the car into a concrete culvert while he's trying to turn around. He had made it to Lyons County, Kansas, where the crash happened. Before the Lyons County Sheriff deputy showed up, Tim had called Charlene about the crash, and she is pissed because now she has to drive to Kansas and rent another car. When the deputy shows up, the car is still running, but there's a clicking noise coming from the engine. Tim informs the deputy that he has a weapon on him, but does have a concealed carry. As the second deputy arrives, the first responding deputy tells the second one, keep an eye on him. He's got a firearm on him, has a concealed carry, is getting a divorce. He's from Texas, just out driving around, thinking about heading to New York to visit a friend, quotations. Tim and Charlene meet at a gas station, have a short conversation, then go their separate ways. From October 21st at 7:03 p.m. to 2:07 p.m. on October 23rd, Tim's cell phone had 36 missed calls. He had either turned his phone off or it was in airplane mode. The last tower his phone pinged off of was at 10:15 a.m. on the 21st in Missouri, and then went dark. A rental car with Michigan plates is spotted by traffic cameras at 10:52 p.m. on the 21st going east on the I-86 and again heading north on I-390 at 5:25 a.m. on the 22nd. Just before 2 p.m., Tim reaches Sodas and parks the rental car down the street from Josh and Amber's house. Josh is outside near his truck when a ski-masked, hooded man shoots him. Just as Amber is pulling into the driveway with their son Josh Jr. in the back seat, Josh yells to her, and I'm assuming something along the lines of "get out of here," because Amber had managed to get her car into reverse as Tim had shot Amber in the head. With the car being in reverse and Amber slumped over in the car rolled out of the driveway, hitting the garbage cans, and finally being stopped by a neighbor's car. Tim returns his attention back to Josh, who has now gotten to the ground and has wriggled underneath his truck, where Tim continues to shoot Josh 9 more times. Tim leaves and is caught on the neighbor's security camera, but is still in the ski mask and hooded sweatshirt. Tim heads back, and as planned, is back home by Monday for work as a driver for Frito-Lay. Charlene alleges that she learned of the shooting through Facebook and reaches out to Josh's mom, Barb Niles, with her sympathy act and heads to New York to grieve with the family right after her phone call to her family attorney. Even though Tim had called her around 3 a.m. the next morning, having star 67ing before dialing Charlene's number. It doesn't take authorities long to figure out who was responsible for the shootings of Josh and Amber. 6 days later, that beautiful brick ranch house in Sunray is surrounded by authorities. They throw a grenade through the front door and crash a car in the backyard fence. Tim surrenders without incident. While back in New York, Charlene is at a longtime family friend's home where she is arrested in connection to the murders. Charlene begins to sing like a canary to help herself. She gets a plea deal with the testimony to testify against her husband, Tim Dean. And she received 28 years, reducing her charges from second-degree murder to first-degree manslaughter. She is currently an inmate at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility in Westchester County and will be eligible for parole in 2042. On May 20th, 2019, Tim Dean's trial began. With only 5 days of testimony, it only took the jury 4 hours of deliberation to come back with a guilty verdict with a laundry list of charges, including 1 count of first-degree murder, 2 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of criminal possession of a weapon, and 1 count of second-degree conspiracy. Tim received life without the possibility of parole. He is currently an inmate at Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemore in Clinton County. So what happened to the third guy in this murder plot? Well, it turns out that a week after Charlene and Tim were arrested, Braun Bowler was arrested. He takes a plea deal also, but while he's testifying against Tim, he contradicts statements that his lawyers made about his innocence and ignorance of the murder plan. And his plea deal was that he needed to plead guilty to second-degree conspiracy. A judge sentenced him to 1 to 3 years in prison, where he served his time in Wayne County and was released November 12, 2020. As for the children, Gabby and Bentley are aware of what their mother had done to their dad. Bentley is mad with hatred towards Charlene, and Gabby is just confused about the whole thing. Both are seeking therapy and are living with Josh's sister and her 4 children. Josh Jr. is with Amber's parents. Skylar resides with her dad, Jace, and Maddie, who now suffers with PTSD, is with Christina. Josh's younger brother, Kenny, and his girlfriend and their 2 beagles now reside in the house where the tragic endings of Josh and Amber's lives were taken from them way too young. They have flowers that Amber loved planted, and they hosted an almost 4th of July get-together with all the siblings, even Skylar, who Jace had flown with up to New York so she could spend time with her half-siblings. As for Maddie and the child abuse she endured, she will never receive justice since murder trumps child abuse. There's a little backstory on Maddie and kind of her PTSD is when Maddie would cry when she was with Charlene and Tim, Charlene would spray Maddie's face with water to the point that Maddie wouldn't go swimming for the longest time because she didn't want to get her face wet, which triggers her PTSD. 5 small children's lives have been changed forever, all because of one woman whose actions cost so much. Like I said, this was a little bit different case. There's actually closure. It's not a cold case, but it was brought to me, and when I started digging into it, it was interesting. But this is a podcast about cold cases, and I've got something for you. You didn't actually think I was going to end it that way, did you? So I actually went down a rabbit hole, and I found what is known as the oldest cold case on record in the world. It is Otzi the Iceman. So I'm going to just get into this story. It's really interesting. We've all heard of mummified corpses, right? The rituals of preparing the body with the organs removed and preserved with applied chemicals. And we've all heard of mummies being extracted for our own personal gratification or for our knowledge of how death worked in the past. On September 19th of 1991, a couple of tourist hikers were out doing their thing on the Simulayan Glacier in Tyrolean. I'm hoping I'm saying these correctly. Or known as the Atztal Alps. That is one. It is the Alps. They border Italy and it's on the Italian-Austrian border. When they came upon a site that they would have stories to tell for a lifetime and more. Tourist Helmut Simon came across the body of a man believed to be somewhere between the ages of 25 and 35 years old, a short man of probably 5 feet 2 inches or 1.6 meters and weighing about 110 pounds or 50 kilograms. Helmut and his hiking partner came across a caveman, more or less. With global warming being what it was in the early 90s, it had melted the glacier to reveal what we now call Ötzi, the Iceman. Ötzi is believed to have fallen victim to the elements crossing the Alps, where he died of freezing due to exhaustion and exposure. It was later determined, with today's more advanced technology, like a simple x-ray machine, that Ötzi hadn't died from the elements at all. He was murdered. And he had been... They had done radiocarbon dating, and they had dated him all the way back to 3300 BCE, or before Common Era, when in 2001, scientists had taken the x-ray of Ötzi. They came across an object in Ötzi's left shoulder, and that object happened to be an arrowhead, which suggests Ötzi was shot and bled out, with that being the ultimate cause of his death. Now, knowing what was Ötzi's probable cause of death, it was noted that Ötzi had what looked to be a defense wound on his right hand, a cut between his thumb and forefinger that went all the way to the bone, and it had healed slightly, appearing that the injury had happened within 1 or 2 days of him dying. Had Ötzi been in the village in the days prior getting supplies and got into a fight with one of the villagers and won the fight, had that villager ventured up the mountain to get the ultimate revenge, after Ötzi was shot and bled out, the elements of nature took over and preserved his body so well that it was in better shape than some bodies that are found today that have only been exposed to the elements for a few days. Examiners were able to determine that Ötzi died somewhere between late spring and early summer due to the pollen in his digestive tract, along with his last meal of ibex meat, which is basically a longhorn sheep meat, a primitive wheat known as einkorn or einkorn, some form of fat like bacon or cheese, and bracken, a common fern, and that he had at least 61 tattoos on his body that were more placed on his joints and spine, indicating that the tattoos were some sort of medical treatment. The shooting of Ötzi was more likely a personal one, where the shooter didn't take chances at close range, but rather from a distance of 100 feet away. Ötzi's death was just a killing, as robbery hadn't seemed to be a motive, since when Ötzi's body was found by Helmut and his tourist buddy, they come across a pretty valuable copper axe that was with Otzi's body, and it was never taken. And that is the brief story of Otzi and how nature sometimes does a better job of mummifying a body than those that at the time specializing in it had done. And obviously we're never gonna find out who the culprit was or the shooter was. It's kind of hard to get a suspect that from 5,300 years ago. I hope you guys like this episode. We are on Facebook. We do now have the Instagram page up, Twitter. You can leave a 5-star review, leave a positive review. You can get a hold of us at let's tell their story at Gmail. If you have any cases you'd like me to look into, I have no problem researching that. If you just want to, just send them our way. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and that's been the story. You guys have a great day.